What happens when you can't plan the future the way you thought you would? Today, we're talking about living with uncertainty and how to hold hope, meaning, and identity when nothing feels predictable. Welcome to the Spoonful Show. You're listening to the Spoonful Show, honest conversations about chronic illness, identity, and finding meaning, even when life changes everything. I'm Rachel, a chronic illness spoonie, and I'm really glad you're here. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Spoonful Show. My name is Rachel, and I am thrilled to have you join me today. This week, I haven't been feeling very well, and I've been doing some binging on some TV shows. I'm not a big movie person. It's funny, I guess, thinking about sitting and watching a movie for 2 hours is like a waste of time, but I'll easily watch 3 one-hour episodes of a TV show. So I don't know. That's just the way my brain works. I enjoy TV shows a lot more. But right now I'm rewatching Virgin River because the new season comes out in a couple of days. So I have been watching from the start to refresh my memory about that show. Love that show. And I also love like 2000s, I guess, teen shows. I'm 48, but who would guess that I love, like, I'm watching the OC for the first time. One Tree Hill is one of my favorites. Of course, Grey's Anatomy, I watch. That's one of my all-time favorites as well. I want to know what you're binging and what you do on those days when you're not feeling real well. What are the shows that you can sit back with a blanket and watch and they bring comfort? Let me know in the comments or send me a DM through Instagram or TikTok. So today we're diving into something that so many of us live with, but we don't always name: uncertainty. Not just the uncertainty of a flare or a bad week, but the deeper uncertainty of what our bodies might do next, what the future might hold, and how to build a meaningful life without clear guarantees. I'm joined by Karen Wagner and Chris Burton from the Invisible Strength podcast. I was on their podcast just a few weeks back and invited them on to share some of their experience on this topic. Both of them live with lupus, and together we explore what it means to listen to your body, redefine strength, hold hope without denying reality, and find joy even in the seasons that are unpredictable. If you've ever wrestled with questions like, where will I be in 10 years? Or how do I trust my body again? You're not alone. So let's get started. Welcome, Karen and Chris, to the Spoonful Show. I've been really looking forward to our conversation today, and I want to welcome you here.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yes. So I was on your podcast just a few weeks back, the Invisible Strength podcast, and had such a great time. I wanted to invite you in to discuss this topic. So let's start out by having each of you kind of introduce yourself. Karen, we'll start with you ladies first, of course, right?
Sounds good. So I'm Karen Wagner. I've been living with lupus for 17 years. And even though there was many years where I really struggled through it, I've gotten to a place where I've really managed and learned to live with the uncertainty that come with these conditions. But outside of that, I would say if I was a Spice Girl, I would be Sporty Spice. My family and I are very active living in Minnesota. We spend a lot of time outside skiing, snowmobiling, skating, all those outdoor fun things that help pass by the long winter season. And yeah, outside of that, I have 2 boys. We love, just like I said, being outside and being as active as we can when my condition allows.
Mm-hmm. I think if I were a Spice Girl, I'd be Sleepy Spice, but but I love that. I love that. And Chris?
Yeah, good to be here. Chris Burton. I've been living with lupus for 14 years. And it's really been one of those peculiar journeys where something that has been a challenge, and one of the great challenges of my life has allowed me to meet so many amazing people, and getting a chance to, meet people like you, Rachel, and getting a chance to work with Karen has been just extraordinary. And I don't know too much about the Spice Girls, so I'm gonna go to like my neighborhood in terms of what groups I can pick a member of, and I'll say if I were a member of the Wu-Tang Clan, I'd be like Jizza the Genius. I'll stick with
Oh,
that.
love that. I love
Make
that.
the pivot.
I love that. So this has been kind of a collaborative effort for us. I always like when I'm inviting Spoonies in to co-host to get their ideas, and so we settled on talking about living alongside uncertainty and how we learn to trust our bodies when there's so many different things that could go wrong, so many things that we don't know what our future is going to hold. And so let me ask you this. What does uncertainty look like for you guys day to day? I'm a little bit familiar with lupus, but walk us through those uncertainties that you all live with.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick us off with this. I think, especially if you're approaching a flare, in a flare, or coming out of a flare, I think those are the highest points of uncertainty. Where, on a regular day-to-day basis, you're always just sort of learning how to live at like 80% of your max capacity. So if you think about it, for example, I like to play sports, I like to work out, that I am not going to go all out in the way that I would have pre-lupus. So if I know, for example, that I could comfortably lift, this number of pounds, X number of pounds, I'm going to try to do 80% of that so that my recovery is easier. And I'm always thinking about what are the practices, almost rituals I need to make sure that I'm getting back to baseline. But when you're approaching a flare, in a flare, coming out of a flare, you're nowhere near even half of your capacity. And it moves that baseline all the way to the ground, if not below the floor sometimes, where the big win of the day might be you got up and went downstairs. The big win of the day might be that you were able to like walk to the bathroom unassisted, depending on the severity of the flare. And so it's really a illness that requires you to pay so much attention to your body and make sure that you're really just gauging exactly where you are each day and doing that personal assessment so that you're able to move the baseline accordingly, depending on what your body's able to give you.
Mm-hmm.
To build on that, I think it can take a long time to get to the place where Chris is talking about learning to go 80% and not maxing yourself out. And then flares can be as serious as being hospitalized with organ complications or other complications, which we've experienced. And they can be relatively minor. So one example was I went on vacation a few weeks ago, which was fantastic, but it resulted in severe joint pain in my knee. And so I was literally on crutches for 3 weeks. I'm finally kind of hobbling back to normal now. But it's about like dealing with the unpredictable symptoms where even if you are mostly in remission, little things like that can just pop up at any given moment. So there's always that in the back of your mind, maybe something might come up and you just have to be aware of that. And as Chris mentioned, be really in tune with your body so that when you do have the chance to feel something coming on, maybe you can course correct a little bit or just change so that you can recover as best and as effectively as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm. I think you both come up with really great points because in the beginning, when I was diagnosed with MS, I didn't know my body very well, and I would push through, and then I would feel that over the next couple of days. And I'm 10 years after diagnosis, and I'm just now getting to the point where I'm like adjusting what I'm doing so I don't get in a flare, so that I don't land myself in bed for 2 days. And it's it's so difficult to learn that. And as far as uncertainty for me, I kind of represent the progressive illness in a whole nother kind of umbrella of uncertainty of where am I going to be at in 10 years and physically and cognitively and all of that. So for people with progressive illnesses, there's a lot of fear, not just about getting myself into a flare or getting into the hospital with a relapse or anything like that, but there's that added uncertainty of, am I going to be in a wheelchair in 10 years? You know, now I'm kind of bordering the line of I use a walker, and I occasionally will use a wheelchair or a scooter, but it's like kissing that line of when is that going to happen? And so I think for everybody, it's individual on their illness and also what that illness comes with. That can create all this uncertainty about where life's going to go.
Appreciate you mentioning like kissing that line. In yoga, there's a term where you find your edge, where you're not going too far. And I think it's a lot of trial and error and give and take of, yep, I way overdid it. I can't do that again. And it just takes a lot of lessons to really get in tune with your body, understand what you can do in a given season, and then learn to adapt to it. It can be a long process. I don't know, maybe I'm a really slow learner, but it took me many years to figure that out.
Well, I'm right there with you. I guess I'm a slow learner too.
Me too. I failed many times.
So many times.
So many times before I recognized that I wasn't doing myself, or I was doing myself a disservice by not listening to my body and recognizing what that edge was for me.
It took me years to get to a point where I could work on my inner voice to a point of kindness toward the self, because I had spent so much of my time, I guess, in retrospect, in denial that things were as bad as they actually were. Like, part of me wanted to just think of lupus as the same way of having a cold in the winter, like having sniffles or something. It's like, this will eventually pass. I just gotta, drink tea or something. And I remember particularly one of the first questions I asked my rheumatologist when I got diagnosed and I'm fresh out of the hospital was, okay, so how long until I can play basketball again? Because I was coaching basketball while I got diagnosed. And I was like, okay, so how long until I can play? And he was like, I mean, it's gonna take some time. Like, it just didn't seem to be the top of his list in the same way that it was for me. And so it just really was a point of frustration that I couldn't do the athletic things I used to do, or be able to work out as strenuously as I wanted to work out and push myself and progress in those ways. And it took me years to find a much more gentle, tender, and encouraging inner voice to allow me to say, you know what, we didn't do everything we thought we were going to do in the gym today, but we did something. We can go home now. Let's go get some water. Let's go get some food. That took a long time for me to retrain my inner voice.
I went through a long period, probably 4 or 5 years of negative self-talk. And, I'm broken. Look what I did to my family. They don't deserve this. Look what I can't do, instead of look what I can do. And, just feeling the weight of MS being so hard on my shoulders that, my husband and I's relationship went south. We've been able to recover, but I take that all as like, it was because I wasn't treating myself right, that I felt like I didn't deserve any goodness coming at me because of all of these things that I have done, in quotes, done to my family, of them having to take care of me and missing things that because of my illness. And so that self-talk was a turning point for me.
I think you have to rebuild your self-worth, because when these conditions first come on, they're life consuming. they take up every ounce of your energy.
Hmm.
And when you are in such dark places, I know there was a period of time where I definitely lost hope, or I tried not to think about the future because I was just trying to survive every
Right.
single day. And it takes time to be able to, one, realize that, and then two, work on your mindset and your reframing and how you view these conditions, because I think that's the pivotal point in starting to quote unquote recover or learn how to live well with these conditions.
Hmm.
Hmm. You mentioned hope. How do you manage the tension behind hope versus realism?
Ooh.
Because there's a difference in that.
Well, I love your question because something I think about often is the way in which pessimism and cynical reasoning has put on the clothes of realism, right? So when someone is often saying, I'm being realistic, they're not saying, oh, it's going to work out. Or they,
Hmm.
it's not the realistic thing is to assume the realistic thing so often is not to assume that things are going to get better. It's so much more about, well, clearly this is where we are, especially thinking about our conditions. It's like, well, like, this is our new normal. Like things can't ever get better. That's being realistic. And so I think that hope requires a certain amount and a certain level of imagination, right? Because you're currently
Hmm.
in a hospital bed. So you have to imagine yourself not being in a hospital bed. And it is real that you're in that hospital bed, but what isn't necessarily real is that you're going to be in the hospital bed for the rest of your life. And so, in order for us to progress, we have to have some level of imagination, some suspension of belief in what is actually real, and in imagining and therefore creating a world and a scenario where, what is real right now won't always be real. Is I think if we're willing to do that dance of consistently gauging and saying, okay, what can I do from this to that? Because there was a point where the idea of walking downstairs was impossible for me. And now I'm able to do that. Maybe the point is for someone else, a much smaller goal where they're like, I can stand up independently. Or maybe they're saying, I can master using my wheelchair, right? Maybe the reality is that they're going to be in a wheelchair, but it's not going to impede their quality of life because they're still going to be able to do amazing things in spite of that condition. And so all of these different understandings of what's possible all require some level of imagination and some level of hope.
I think a lot of times when you have chronic illness, it's so easy to get bogged down with the statistics and
Oh yeah.
the things that your doctor may say and all of that. But I feel like hope is just believing that there is a possibility of goodness. There's a
Hmm.
possibility of getting better, of feeling better.
Hmm.
And it's so crazy how much the mind can affect your overall well being. And just that
Certainly.
little bit of hope, can make the days not so dark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that hope can give you purpose and goals. So Chris is talking about, okay, I may be in the hospital bed today, but I'm going to walk down the hall by whatever time, or maybe you don't even give it a timeline. You're just hopeful that you're going to get to that point. And so I think being realistic is acknowledging where you're at, how you're feeling, but not letting you wallow in the weight of that, and having that hope to focus on the future and that there are better times to come.
Are you looking for merch that speaks to your truth and makes you laugh? Spoonful of Strength has you covered. Literally. From t-shirts and hoodies to mugs and magnets, every design is made for the chronic illness community with heart, humor, and a whole lot of strength. Funny? Check. Inspirational? You bet. Illness specific? Absolutely. And the best part? I can personalize any design or create a custom shirt for you for no extra charge. So whether you're laughing through the pain or wearing your diagnosis with pride, our designs are funny, fierce, and illness specific, because being chronically ill doesn't mean being chronically boring. So if you want a sweatshirt that gets you, head to spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com. Now that's spoonful with 2 L's. Use code podcast for 20% off your entire cart. How has grief stepped into your journeys of living with lupus?
I think grief was the orientation coordinator for my journey with lupus. I think grief was the welcoming committee. It's like welcome. So you have lupus. This is grief.
Yeah.
I think that
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, or not, right?
Yeah.
So it just seems like there's so many different ways in which grief will show up. There's so many ways that we can measure what we have lost, and they will grief is something that often arrives in waves, right? So as the same as if you're standing on the beach, not every wave is going to necessarily knock you over, but it'll be the smaller waves that kind of build toward a larger wave that may push you further into the sand. And I think in that same way, remembering what you used to be able to do, or remembering what you hoped to be able to do, and all of these different aspects of your life, grief just continues to show up. And I think what has helped me process my sense of grief is understanding that it's a way in which we sort of measure our love, right? That if we didn't appreciate that thing, if we didn't love that thing, then the grief wouldn't be as tremendous as it is.
Yeah. How did grief show up for you, Karen?
Yeah, I think early on, I didn't even know I was grieving. I was the classic example of avoidance. I'm going to take my meds and I'm going to ignore this as best as I could and go on and live my life. But to Chris's point, those waves slowly come in and they build until it gets to a point where you are essentially forced to process it because the wave literally knocks you over. And I think for many of us before our conditions, we had a false sense of certainty. We had these goals and these dreams, and I'm going to accomplish this no matter what. Nothing's going to get in my way. But then when you finally realize that, hey, I might not get to live or do the things that I had envisioned before these conditions, that hits really hard. And so for me, I think it was taking the time to really acknowledge how I was feeling and acknowledge the challenges that not only come with the physical side of it, but just the emotional toll these conditions take. And once I was able to acknowledge it and work on processing and work on reframing, then I was able to kind of gain back some of that hope that I felt like I had lost in the beginning.
Yeah, grief can definitely show up differently for different people. For me, I didn't realize how much of a control freak I was. and I sat down with my therapist one day and he's like, you're feeling all these feelings because you can't control what's happening to your body. And what you're feeling, you can't stop MS. You don't know what it's going to do. You don't know where you're going to be in 5, 10, 15 years. And that is really scary to feel like you're not in control of your body. So, but it would be controlling other things in my life, which cause conflict with sometimes the people around me. When that uncertainty comes in, some of the things that help you all, I think
there's ways in which you can train yourself to slow down enough to appreciate beauty everywhere. I noticed the beauty even in a hospital room, and just taking that back to that very common experience of you're spending so much time with the nurses there, and you're able to like learn, oh, they have the same favorite color, or they like dogs also, or they're from a city that you visited before. And there's all these opportunities for these interactions that, in spite of the horrible nature of the condition you're in, beauty still creeps into the space. Or perhaps you're able to like look out the window and you're seeing the sunset or the sunrise, if you're able to do that. Like there are all these different opportunities, even when we get home, to just notice beauty around us. And I think doing that helps us to reorient ourselves and to reframe where we are. Because to your point, it's very easy for the days to just bleed into each other, and you're like, I don't know, is this Tuesday? I have no clue. But if we slow ourselves down enough and not let our minds race with all the possibilities of further torment and further horrible things happen, but we slow down enough, I believe that allows us to invite beauty into our lives as well.
I love that.
Yeah, so I had mentioned being on crutches the last few weeks and being an active person. I'm somewhat obsessed with working out, of course, because of the health benefits, but more so it is my antidepressant. So when I'm stuck on crutches for 2 weeks, like that mentally really starts to get to me, and I can just feel the weight of that. And to Chris's point, regardless of whether you're on crutches, a hospital bed, I think gratitude is the key to shifting that grief because you can find even the smallest glimmers of beauty in the day to day. Yes, I may be stuck, like I can't use my hands because being on crutches, it's a whole ordeal. And being a mom and a wife, like, and I can't stand a messy house. So it's just like it can be like really just down or depressing after
Mhm.
a while.
Mhm.
And so for me, it was like, well, at least I have a husband who helps out a ton. My boys are now 10 and 8, and they are learning what it's like to help someone out who is maybe going through a hard time. And watching them that's a beautiful lesson to be able to teach them. And then when I can tell that I'm just down, it's like, okay, maybe I need a change of scenery. Like I can just sit outside for 5 minutes, or maybe it's even 30 seconds when it's really cold here, but
Mhm.
just the burst of fresh air and those little moments, I think, are the key to making yourself not get buried by the weight of these conditions.
Yeah. And I think another thing that I tend to do is routine.
Yeah.
Having a routine in the day. I wake up very slowly, and but I have lunch around the same time.
Mhm.
Afternoon, I try and spend a couple trips cleaning. It
Mhm.
makes me feel good that I'm trying to keep the house in order, and
Mhm.
then I devote some time right before my husband comes home to just play games on my iPad and
Mm.
relax. And
Yeah.
so I kind of have a routine set, which makes the day not quite so monotonous. So
Sure.
I can know, okay, well, I've got to clean these things, but I know in a half hour I can relax for a little bit and wait for my husband to get home. Or I am not feeling that well today, so I cannot wait to go back in the bedroom tonight and watch shows that I'm addicted to and things like that. It kind of sets it up to where it's comforting knowing I know what to expect every day.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about building that padding into your schedule because
Yeah.
those rest breaks are critical to maintaining your energy and just keeping your peace mentally and physically.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some ways that you all have found joy living with uncertainty, but still being able to find joy in your life?
Mm. I love this question. I think it's not too disconnected to what I was saying earlier. But I love what you were saying as well with regard to sort of routine, because I think there's something about the way in which not only like that predictability, but also those random spontaneous moments can be
Mm-hmm.
such joyful moments, right? So it can be something like, a child's smile, or seeing like a really beautiful puppy or something like that. Like all of these things that can allow us to have joyful moments. But also, I really want to encourage all of us to celebrate the small victories. Like we've all been through so much, and there's so much that has tried to like break us down to like our very smallest molecule, but at the same time there has been a resilience and a demonstration of that resilience that is worth celebrating. And so being able to say, look at where I was and look at how bad that was compared to where I am now. And while you still have challenges and uncertainties, there are also things that, allow you to keep going. And I think if we focus on that and think about that from time to time, at least, then there's pockets of joy that can show up in our lives.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
When you've been really down in it and you know how hard things can be, many of us have stared death in the face due to various complications. I think seeing those small moments of joy becomes a bit easier because you realize how tough it can be. And those little moments are what makes up life. And so being able to start to notice those, I think life ended up being more joyful for me now because I'm able to recognize all those small glimmers of hope and joyfulness.
It's so easy to look at your life and say, look at everything I've gone through and what this disease has done to me. But it's easier to sit back and say, okay, well, yes, I have MS and type 1 diabetes, but look at the things I get to do because of this. I get to spend more time with my kids, and I get to listen to my body and be able to take breaks. Whereas when I was working, I would just have to keep working and keep going and keep going. Now I have the ability to listen to my body, and I have the ability to find hobbies that I can do that fulfill me. And so looking at it from a different lens of saying, I'm grateful for the things that I can do despite this illness. And Karen, you mentioned gratefulness. I did a grateful journal my therapist had me do a couple of years ago. And that was really helpful because I was stuck in those depressing thoughts. And to be able to wake up each morning, or I did it at the end of the night, what am I grateful for today? And listing 3 things and just ending the night with a grateful heart was really beneficial for me. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, I think it can be easy to just pass through life without noticing, but if you can be intentional, even just a couple minutes of jotting it down or thinking through what you're grateful for, that can be enough to even shift a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want you guys to tell our listeners about your podcast and about social media. Where can they find you? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, so we have Invisible Strength. We post on YouTube. We have a Substack page now that is really incredible. Yeah, it's just been a really great place to have wonderful conversations, just incredible guests who are talking about their journey. And really, it's not just a name, it's actual evidence. Like we see people demonstrating invisible strength all the time. And so please check us out on YouTube, Substack, and anywhere where you get podcasts.
Yep. And our handle on Instagram and YouTube is Unseen Yet Unstoppable.
I love that. That's a great name.
Thank you.
Yeah. I love what you guys are doing. And I really enjoyed being on your podcast. And, you're doing great things and recognizing the people that have stories that need to be told. And so I couldn't think of anybody else. When you all asked me to come on the podcast, I was like, well, yeah, but you got to be on mine too, because this is just, great. And I just appreciate everything, all the lovely words and tips and tricks that you shared, living with an invisible illness and feeling all of the uncertainty can be overwhelming. And so it's really nice of you guys to come in and talk about how to deal with that uncertainty. And do either of you have anything that you want to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I would just encourage folks to know that you don't have to go through this by yourselves. I think that something that I'm really proud of with regard to what we're doing with Invigorate and Invisible Strength is we have support groups that are starting in March. And so if you find yourself saying, I have done this by myself for too long, and I want to be a part of that group. Like, we encourage you to please connect with us, and be sure to join one of our support groups that we're starting in March, and hopefully you'll be a part of it so that you can journey with us.
Well, just to add, I would say, especially early on, these diseases can feel so isolating.
Mm-hmm.
But I always welcome people with open arms into our autoimmune community because it is a remarkable, empathetic, inspirational community. And connecting with people like you, Rachel and Chris, we've had a great run over these last few years.
Mm-hmm.
It just, once I opened myself up to meeting others, my whole world changed living with this condition.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of hope and a lot of opportunity despite these diseases. So just want to reiterate that you do not have to do this alone. And if you're feeling like you are, like, please join us for one of the support groups. We're here for you and happy to support in any way, shape, or form that we can.
I love that. I would be happy to provide a link to our listeners for the information on the support groups, and there'll be a link to your podcast and your Instagram as well. So
Awesome.
Thank you both so much for spending some time with me. I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Rachel. It was a wonderful conversation.
Absolutely. We appreciate you.
Thank you. I hope today's conversation reminded you that uncertainty may be part of the story, but so are resilience, adaptability, growth. You're allowed to build a beautiful life, even without guarantees. And it doesn't mean that we're living without purpose. It means redefining strength, redefining hope, and choosing to show up anyway. Thank you for being part of this community, a place where we can be honest about the unknown and still believe in what's possible. Thank you for saving some spoons to be with me today. Until next time, take care. Thank you for listening to The Spoonful Show. Follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. Leave a rating, review, and comment. Connect with me on Instagram at Spoonful of Strength and TikTok at spoonful.of.strength. Remember, that's spoonful with 2 L's. Shop customized t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, mugs, and more on our Etsy shop at spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com and use code podcast for 20% off your entire cart.